Father, we want to come to you this morning thanking you for the good night's rest, and now for another opportunity in searching out of your word the precious truths of life. We pray, Lord, that your Holy Spirit will continue to lead and guide our thoughts and our conversation, and open up more and more of the precious truths that you have for us, so that we can understand the lessons that you want to teach us. And we want to thank you. We pray also that the Holy Spirit will continue to direct Brother Jeff's mind, and that it will leave also the lasting impressions that we need. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, still working on the same premise as yesterday, that chapter 4 and chapter 5 is the everlasting gospel, and that Nebuchadnezzar is the wise virgins, and Belshazzar is the foolish virgins. Let's put same thing today, chapter 5 over the top. We finished chapter 4, right? So 5 verses each. And you didn't do really well on your explanation of the first 5 verses yesterday, so we'll give you opportunity to try again today. You can do the first 5 verses of chapter 5.
First 5 verses, there shall Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine, and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote.
So what do we have in there? Pardon me?
Yeah, the great feast.
Okay, we're going to let Tabot
I
tell
don't
us.
think I was here when he did this. I don't think I probably left by then.
When we did what?
When you first looked at this.
Okay, so what do you see in it?
Well,
Someone's already helped you. There's a feast.
There's
Where
a feast,
where are
yeah.
we going to put the feast? This is chapter 4.
Well, the feast was right before when Esther went in. She had 2
Well,
feasts.
I'll give you a hint, my sister Kathy.
Okay.
The feast can go at different waymarks.
Okay.
You have to determine which feast it is. So
So
the
by
fact that
this-
Esther had feasts. In Esther, Ahasuerus had a feast, right? Here, for how long? 6 months? Was it 180 days?
180.
And then Esther had a double feast, or then there was a feast in the courtyard for 7 days. Esther has a double feast there too. So I'm just saying that feast. So before you just say Belshazzar had a feast, where are you going to put it, my brother?
well,
What are they
the
doing?
The feast comes in, they're drinking wine, and the feast comes in connection with the feast is the handwriting on the wall, which is the 2520. We locate that in 911. It's an educated guess.
Really?
Where are you locating it?
I get to ask the question. Someone want to help him out,
I would say it's
or
at
give him a
9/11.
second witness? Pardon me.
The feast is at 9/11 because that's when they took on spiritual formation, which is the Babylonian wine, right? And that's also when we have to eat. We have to eat the little book.
Okay, so they're drinking wine. What does that mean?
false doctrine, depending on what kind of wine they're drinking, new wine or old
Yeah,
wine.
there'd be about, in Jeremiah 25, what does the drinking of the wine represent?
Judgment.
Okay, judgment, but there's a way that I wanted to express this different.
Rough.
That close of probation. They filled their cup. The probation is closed. So where's he going to close his probation? Belshazzar. At the midnight cry? Okay, so maybe you forgot the original premise. The original premise is that Nebuchadnezzar is the wise virgins in the everlasting gospel that's illustrated in Daniel chapter 4 and 5, and Belshazzar is the foolish virgin. So where does Nebuchadnezzar close his probation? And that's not addressing the fact that we can have more than one application. All right, we're dealing with the one that we were sticking to yesterday. He closed his probation at the midnight cry. Nebuchadnezzar did. The tree was cut down. Well, what's his story? Who is he? He's restored. He's the wise virgin. Where does he manifest himself as the wise virgin? The Sunday law, right here. At the end of the days, his reason returns. So where is Belshazzar going to manifest his foolish character in contrast with Belshazzar's wise character? At the Sunday law. In the very night he's going to be slain. What night? This was night. Did we put that up there? No, we haven't put that up there because that's from Daniel chapter 2.
Cyrus entered the gate.
Okay, when Cyrus enters the gate, we're getting ahead of the verses, is down here, right? Why? What's Cyrus entering the gate typifying?
Because he opens the gate.
When?
October 22nd.
October 22nd, Sunday law, okay? So now, Sister Tamina?
Yeah, he opens the gate, no one can open.
So if Belshazzar is going to ultimately close his probation down here and manifest the foolish character, in contrast with Nebuchadnezzar's wise character, where's the feast? Has to be at midnight.
Well, if they are drinking the wine of the close of probation. If the wine is the same as Ezekiel 25, should be at the
Jeremiah 25.
Jeremiah 25 should be at the.
Isn't this where we put the feast? As we went through this before? You guys got your notes.
There is the writing, right?
Pardon me?
There's also the writing. It's at the same hour as the feast.
The same hour as the feast, there's the writing on the wall.
And the writing we learned is related to sin, to exposing sin.
The sin's exposed when it's written on the wall.
Judgment.
I have notes when the feast is at 9/11.
Brother
Okay.
Noel, yeah.
But also morning class with Jeff.
We had the feast at 9/11, then the queen comes in at midnight, and then Daniel comes in at midnight cry, and then Cyrus or Belshazzar dies at the Sunday law.
Yeah.
That's how we have marked it.
Okay.
That the feast is that history.
Back here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
without that whole history.
This history is the
He's
history of the
feasting.
feast.
Yes.
He's feasting and drinking.
Okay, so now you've got your house. Are you? Where are you going to put the feast? You were distracted, huh?
I was right. I guess locating the feast. I guess when you look at the passage, I'll make an educated guess here. You could locate it at the Sunday law because in that feast is when they fill up the measure of their iniquity, and we know that when you fill
That
up,
wasn't what I was inferring, but go ahead.
when you fill out the measure of your iniquity, that's the close of probation is that Sunday law. The writing on the wall 25:20, saying your kingdom is finished. So you could locate it at the Sunday law on one level, I guess. But if you're going to identify the feast, I guess maybe as that as a progression, you could probably still locate it at 9/11.
Okay. So if you're going to locate it at 9/11, what do you have there in the first 5 verses?
Says,
What's the first verse? Sorry.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. So feast is wine.
So you're going to put the feast here.
I guess you could-
Anyone want to protest that? Now that it's going down in ink? What does the 1,000 represent?
That's what I was gonna ask.
The 10? Perhaps?
Oh,
In
maybe.
this verse, does it say 1,000? Like 1 fee for 1,000 and 1,000.
1,000 would flee at the. But why would I so casually put
Because we can
the
put
10 for
there
1,000?
because of the-
10
Because we've seen in these histories like is it in here where we have 330, 300, 3,000? We see these multiples in these various histories. So I don't know what the 1,000 is, but I'm underlining the 10 because we have 10 there. Tyler?
It seems a little bit ambiguous where the feast is right now, at least to me personally, because there's nothing really that, at least that we've broken down yet, that really places it at one waymark versus the other. You could put a feast at almost any of these waymarks. I imagine the 1,000 is probably key to figuring out where it is, but it doesn't seem like it's a hard and fast
you could
place.
put 10 in here or 10 in here so the 1,000 don't solve your problem
Yeah, that's my
for
point.
these two periods.
I think.
Tamina, then Michael.
The 1,000, they're being gathered, or there is a, the 10 kings are assembled at 9/11, right? And so this feast is, all the people are invited and they drink the wine of Babylon. So I think that gives us a justification for 9/11. But I wanted to add a comment, and Ellen White says that when the handwriting at the wall started to write, that they were sealed, they couldn't move anymore. The 1,000 and Belshazzar, they were judged. So it must be a group of people which are being judged till midnight cry, it has to be previous.
How many people are in verse 2? 4. And they're all associated with Belshazzar, so this is the foolish virgins. You got the number 4. Michael?
Belshazzar is included.
Yeah, he's one of them. He's the foolish king according to Sister White.
What I was saying is in contradiction to what Tyler was saying, is I think that though we don't have much in the first 5 verses, as we continue forward, the context allows us to put it at 9/11 because the queen coming in and telling him a message, and then Daniel comes in and he's clothed
Are you
with
sick or you got allergies?
Allergies.
he's clothed with the robe and the chain and the ring, and so the context of the whole chapter pushes it to 9/11.
Okay, so let's keep going forward with that. What do we got to say about the vessels taken out of the temple?
You can mark that at 9/11 or the midnight cry. Both of those are symbols at either place.
Okay, so you got a 4 in verse 2 and verse 3. They drank wine. How many gods do they praise? If you 6, if you go through, this 6 is a symbol of Babylon or man, the false worship. Okay, say the same hour. So what hour does the handwriting come on the wall if we're doing it here?
The visible. It's in the middle. It's the visual test.
It's the visual test. Is it in the middle of this whole history or in the middle of here? Because there's a 3-step test here, right? 1, 2, 3, but there's also
3.
1, 2, 3.
There's also 3 within the binding off.
Yeah, but that's not an everlasting gospel.
Right. That's right.
I think
So
it was
it's-
marked before midnight. when we studied it last.
Marked before midnight.
Oh, no, at midnight. Sorry, at midnight.
Going by your notes is okay as long as you're going to present the logic that made you put that note there. Sister Tyler, Sister Tamina, and Brother Tyler. Brother Tyler, go first.
Maybe the logic is that the feast is the first test, you know, what you're going to drink or eat, and they're eating wine / drinking wine. And then the second would be obviously the handwriting on the wall, the visual test, and the third would be the judgment. So you can mark it. So
But the
at that,
handwriting on the wall, according to Tamina, is the judgment. She says when the handwriting comes on the wall, they're sealed. That's what she was saying. There's a Spirit of Prophecy quote.
oh, then I don't know. If that's the case, then
That must not be the visual if that's the judgment.
Yeah, I have a question. The same hour, is it meant to be is it the same as the 1 hour? Because we marked the 1 hour on Sabbath in the binding off. So it must be then at midnight, at the same hour.
Is it this hour, or this hour?
Yeah, that's my question.
Well,
I would-
we've shown that it, what do you mean? Because,
This is an hour, this is an hour, and this is an hour.
oh, so you're wanting to know if it's for
My
the
question
priest or
is
the...
if the same hour is the same time period as the hour.
It's the same time period they were drinking wine is all I can tell you from the passage.
So that'd be from 9/11 to midnight.
From 9/11 to midnight.
Well, yeah, in my notes I have the same hour down there, but because the queen comes in at midnight and she tells Belshazzar that Daniel's there and he can explain things.
It's just, he's already looking for an explanation at midnight. Sister Tanya?
I want to add some information from Ruby and Herald, February 8, 1881. We're told here that Belshazzar had already been defeated in battle by Cyrus, and for 2 years had been besieging the city of Babylon. Within that seemingly impregnable fortress, with its massive walls and its gates of brass protected by the river Euphrates, and supplied with provision of 20 years, the Valachi market felt secure and passed his time in mirth and revelry. One night he made a great feast for thousands of his lord. So it was within the time that he knew that he was under siege that he had lifted himself up and said that he's not going to be able to be conquered because of where he was at. Does that make any difference of where we're going to be placing him?
I don't know. Anyone see how that makes an argument about anything? Tamina?
Ellen White says in her comment on those verses, she says, at the moment when the sacrilegious revelry was at its height, a bloodless hand came forth and wrote the words. So when it was at its height, the hand came.
midnight.
So that must be midnight. And then later on she says, Belshazzar was afraid. His conscience was awakened. The fear and suspicion that always followed the curse of the guilty seized him. And then she continues on how his conditions were. So we have at its height, the hand comes, and at the same time Belshazzar is made aware of that something is wrong. He's off. He's being made afraid. And we have when Daniel 10, when Daniel's being touched, when the angel comes down, that the other ones, they're afraid and they're fleeing to the rocks or in the mountains.
The two classes?
Yeah.
So what's that got to do with anything?
So I'm just saying this must be midnight when the handwriting
Okay.
comes.
Verse 6 says he's troubled. And we place it at 9/11. When the handwriting
Michael?
The way that we've applied it before is that,
We want to apply it correctly.
yeah, I know. But I'm saying the way that we applied it before, we had all this discussion. And we came to the conclusion, at least I thought that we came to the conclusion, that the handwriting on the wall is the 1840 and 43 charts. That this is the handwriting on the wall. And that these charts come in just after 9/11. And they're representing a visual test, which are proclaiming the judgment against the United States, against God's people.
Tanya?
It says right here that after the writing on the wall says, trembling with alarm, he cried aloud to bring in the astrologers. So we have a loud cry cried aloud to bring in astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers.
I was going to say the same thing, and also if we're
The
looking
same thing as what?
as what Tanya said, that if you read later on, you see that there's an inquiry. And there's other things. So if Daniel chapter 5 is the foolish virgins, and Daniel chapter 4 is the wise, we need to look at the wise and line it up. So we have an inquiry at midnight cry, and we have a loud cry at the midnight cry, and so we need to.
Yeah, that's my argument.
Use 4 to help
you
us with
can
5.
Use 4 and 5 to guide each other.
So where are we putting the writing?
So let's read the next 5 verses. It seems like people are kind of making that argument. We have to read a little bit further on to have the logical justification for what we want to do here. Verse 6.
Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers and Chaldeans and the soothsayers. And the king spake, and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing, and shew me the interpretations thereof, shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonished. Now the queen, by reason of the word of the king and his lords, came in the banquet house. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed.
Okay, lots of stuff in there to start dealing with. Okay, Brother Tyler.
A good one is that he's third. Daniel, jumping ahead a little bit, Daniel is going to be made the third in the kingdom. And he's going to get this chain and the scarlet and everything, and that's the midnight cry, from my understanding. So I think you can justifiably work backwards and
What
say...
is the third ruler for? Explain that for us.
The third angel's message, it's a symbol of that.
The third angel's message is arriving.
Yeah, it's arriving, because you also have, at 9/11, Pharaoh with Joseph. Joseph is in the second chariot, and it's marking the arrival of the second angel's message as well.
And he's made second ruler in the kingdom, whereas Daniel's made third ruler.
Yep. So I think working backwards, you can say...
And Daniel could be the wise of this history, because how many of the soothsayers are noted in this same verse? 3. So you got the arrival of the third main message with both the wise and the foolish virgins. Go ahead.
So I think working backwards, you can say that this is all within that short period, and with what Tamina said before, I think midnight is probably, at least on this fractal level, where the handwriting would be.
That's what Michael said.
Yeah, if that's what Mike was saying, then that's what I'm saying.
No, he said
I was
visual text.
disagreeing with her.
Oh, he was
Why?
disagreeing.
I was saying that it's the charts before that history.
Yeah, but the charts are...
They're before midnight. Midnight would be the beginning of the third step, where she's saying that the charts, or the writing is the third step.
Midnight is the beginning of the third step.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
That from midnight to the midnight cry is the third step.
The third test.
Third test. So she's putting it as the Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin is the judgment of the third step, where I've understood it as the message given by the people of judgment. It's the visual test, as I've understood it. not saying that it is.
It's a visual test here, but you're also saying it's a visual test here. The big one, it's easy to see that the visual test is right here, right? Because of what?
The living testimony.
Because of many.
The doubling.
The doubling of the pronouncement, but Michael's saying it's the charts here, and Tamina's saying it's right here. So go ahead, Tyler. You weren't done, were you? You were?
Yeah. No. I guess you could also say that. Well, I guess we have to hammer that thought out. But this is in the same hour, so I think the same hour kind of plugs us into where we're talking about a little bit.
What
which
are we
would
talking
be midnight, because we've from this point identified the same hours as binding on periods.
You're saying this is the hour here?
Yeah.
What's your second witness for that?
The one right above it.
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar.
And there's also he's a
There's Stonad.
Stonide.
Who is? The Stanid.
The king.
Is it Eid? It's Eid, isn't it? Somebody read it.
Stanid.
The Stanid.
Stunning, yeah.
The Stonid.
Where's the Stanid?
I don't know.
It's that.
9.
9.
Belshazzar.
He's a Stanid, but
It's trouble.
he's greatly troubled. And how many times has his countenance changed? Twice. So he's got a double countenance change. That'd be here or here.
Pointer, period.
It's doubled. It
Could
would
be
be
right.
over there at midnight cry.
Countenance.
And in verse 5 we missed the symbol of the candlestick.
Yeah, and the wall.
Yeah, we passed over a bunch to add the next 5 verses to go back in. So in verse 5, you're going backwards now. That's doubled is the reason I put times 2. So where are you going to put what do you want to do with verse 5? Tell me.
I just want to mention that usually we place the candlestick on the midnight prayer.
Also, you have the wall in that
Yeah,
same
and
verse.
It's written on the wall.
Written.
That's true. It's the candlestick up on the pasture.
It was the same hour.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 4 fingers.
Okay, so
I didn't want to.
here or here? I thought we already nailed this down once.
Well,
Where's the wall? That's an easy one, right? This has got to be the wall.
It's been suggested that there might even be a wall at midnight.
There might be a wall at midnight.
Well, every
Yeah.
time you see a decree, there could be a wall there too. So.
The queen comes in.
Okay, the queen comes in. Tell us about the queen coming in.
I'm not sure about the logic, but we placed it at midnight before, and I think because she plays the same role as Mordecai.
There you
and,
go.
Abigail.
Abigail. You got 2 witnesses that Abigail and Hatak, or that someone contacts, a second party contacts the character of this history. A message sent from Mordecai to Esther, and a message sent to Abigail by the Nabal's men.
An Arioch?
An Arioch from Nebuchadnezzar. So we're going to put the queen here.
That's, I think, the logic we used in the sense.
The way I have read it at Ellen White's writings and prophets and kings, she's referring and telling Belshazzar, the entire group, about Nebuchadnezzar and his fall the 7 times and how he raised up. Basically, what it seemed to me like that she's referring to the old path. Could that be? That she comes in and shows them the old path? Because he was supposed to know the old path, but he forgot it, or...
Yeah,
I think that's the story here.
We've said
Is that Nebuchadnezzar is the old path for Belshazzar.
Okay.
So,
That he knew.
So at midnight... this
but
queen
she's
comes in?
explaining them when it's too late for him.
Yeah, when the virgins awake, right? The foolish words of virgins.
And that could refer to the charts then.
Yeah, that would be the charts, but here, this is a summary of the charts and you're lost. This is end of test.
I have the quote where she says that he was to render his account, where the handwriting comes at the wall and he is speechless, and then she says Belshazzar had impiously lifted himself up against the God of heaven. Impiously, thank you. And had trusted in his own might, not supposing that any would dare say, "What dost thou dost?" But now he realized that he must render an account of the stewardship entrusted him, and that for this wasted opportunity and his deficient attitude he could offer no excuse. So he was being judged as the handwriting at the wall came.
Yeah, his probation was closed.
Close.
And the handwriting on the wall is going to come here. This is the wall.
Mm-hmm.
We can put a wall here too for a law. But the many kind of locks it in right here, right? What else locks it in?
Yeah.
This is his judgment. I mean,
Nabal.
his, well, Nabal, but who else? Nebuchadnezzar's judgment right here.
Oh, yeah.
7 times. So many doubled. Okay, Tyler.
You have
Brittany.
a really good example of what's going on here is he's being spiritually judged, and then he's physically judged later by Cyrus when he actually slays him. You have the same thing with Nabal. His heart is turned to stone, and then 10 days later he dies. It's a spiritual judgment and then a physical judgment. And then you also have Judas. He gets up from the table and he's judged, and then he actually hangs himself. That's his physical judgment. So you're seeing that same dynamic, which locks you into the midnight cry Sunday law as the 2, or midnight cry, depending on which level you're looking at it.
What level are we looking at?
I think we're looking at the midnight cry right now, I guess. Or
We're trying to line it up with Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
We're using him for a point of
haven't-
reference, and
haven't
his
we-
judgment right here.
Didn't we already said that there was a pronouncement of there was an investigation of judgment, pronouncement of judgment, and then there's execution of judgment?
Is that you're trying to say? That's another way to say what he just said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brittany.
Another witness for the midnight cry.
Louder.
Another witness for the midnight cry is Belshazzar offers gifts to Daniel, and then Daniel says, "No, you can keep your gifts for yourself," or something. And Ahasuerus offered gifts at the end of the 7 years. I don't remember which chapter.
At the end of the 7 years, someone help her. What 7 years?
7 years, wasn't it 7 years?
At the end of 180 days.
No.
No, at the giving of gifts is referencing the year of release,
Right. The year of release.
And every 7th year there's a year of release.
Okay, year
with gifts
release
given,
is.
which ties us into the 7 years from
The Jubilee.
Joseph's story, which puts it at the midnight cry.
Okay, so
Or the Sunday law.
Yes.
we got to have the wall and the candlestick here, right? And what's going to happen here is what? When we go back in here, what's happening? Repeat and enlarge. It's going back into that history anyway.
Just explain that again. What you're saying.
Is the handwriting on the wall coming here, and then when we take up the subject of the queen and she's coming back in here to explain it, is it dropping back in history or is it progressive? Does it keep moving forward? Why does it drop back in history?
Because the grandmother's reminding her grandson that you have someone among you that your grandfather had used, and that's the Spirit of God among you. So she's telling me to go back and figure it out, that there was someone there that could help him figure out what's going on.
Maybe.
But do we place the handwriting?
She's actually making a prediction. She's telling him, hey, you go to Daniel and he will tell you. She's making a prediction that this man can tell him. And then Daniel comes in and confirms that. And basically tells her what's going to happen, and then right away it happens.
Okay. What were you saying?
Are we sure about the handwriting on the wall in the midnight cry? Because
You want to put it here? You want to put it both places?
Or at least maybe
One place?
Before it, because the queen comes in at midnight, because of. And then,
There's also a decree, isn't that at the midnight?
Okay, let's back up through the verses. We're getting, we seem to be getting more or less convicted about what we thought we already knew.
I just have a question. How could the queen come in before the mini?
You haven't been coming to the class,
That's
okay?
true.
So there are times where you get to this point, and then in midnight it drops back.
Okay.
This may not be that time, but I'm wanting the class to explain whether it is or it isn't
I think
before
it's
we
not.
move beyond it. Pardon me?
I think it's not, in this case.
Okay.
It's not. But,
It's-
yeah,
I
there are
don't think
times
it
it
was
repeats and drops back.
Okay, so speak to Brother Orion's contention. Is the handwriting in the candlestick here or here? Is it at midnight in order to justify the queen coming in to explain it before you get to the midnight cry? Because
Can you give me an
his
example?
judgment, according to Tamina's quote, when the handwriting comes on the wall, his probation's closed, his judgment is underway. And Nebuchadnezzar's judgment is here. And I contend they're the same players. They're the wise and foolish virgins going through the same history.
I think that his judgment, or you're saying that Sister White says that at the moment he's been judged. It feels like, or it seems like it would be once Daniel makes known to him.
He realized that.
It may
he's
seem
back
like that,
on
but that's not necessarily so. You're not judged by the light that you have. You're judged by the light that you could have had. Just because Daniel's saying you should, though thou knewest all this. Daniel says he knew it
About Nebuchadnezzar, he knew all that.
about the
He didn't
warning
know-
message.
He didn't know the actual judgment, the words written on the wall. He didn't know.
No.
And when that was made known to his understanding, it's like at that point
But he knew as he saw the hand, he knew.
he knew something was up. Yeah.
Now he didn't have to be made aware of that by Daniel. He didn't have to.
I'm
He's
saying-
held accountable for that light. That's why Daniel says, though
He was-
thou knewest all this, you knew, you had your warning.
I mean, if we're working by this logic, the second he picks up the cup and takes a sip of it, he's judged. He's closed. He's filled up his probation. He's desecrated the sanctuary.
Yeah, I
That's
think
what
when
it
they
says.
to bring the sacred vessels in,
The same
probation
hour.
closes. It's in the same hour.
Yeah.
Are you-
No, I'm done.
If that's the case, then this is the hour.
Where were you marking with your hand there?
From here to here. If his probation closes when he
because-
brings the temple vessels into his temple.
There's a key word then in verse 2 to answer that. Verse 3, sorry, it says, then they brought in the cups. The feast had already been underway, and then this thing happens. And then the same hour he's judged. Yeah. But Tamina read a really good quote earlier about that at the fullness of the height of the revelry, or whatever the word she uses, the handwriting on the wall comes, which is the same hour that these vessels are desecrated. So
So that's showing a progression.
what
Height, at the height of the revelry.
Yeah,
the
my
revelry
point-
is increasing to a height.
Midnight is
Yeah,
the
my
height of
saying
midnight.
midnight is the height of that. Is my
Okay,
point.
so this is the height, we're
That's-
saying.
Yeah.
So it
Right.
starts at 9/11 and the height at midnight.
In Review and Herald says, while they were at that night in the midst of idolatrous mirth, the king countenance suddenly pales, and he seems paralyzed with terror.
In the midst.
In the
Middle.
midst.
In the midst.
Okay.
Idolatry.
Midst.
Yeah, this is Review and Herald, February 8, 1881.
So the handwriting,
It's at the midst.
Sure.
handwriting,
It's at midnight.
I'm gonna put writing.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
At that point in time, you have the binding off, you have the righteous that are going through their 3 steps, even though it's not the everlasting gospel. And at that time, you're having the judgment of the unrighteous right there, correct?
Yeah.
Because the king
Tares are removed
knew,
first.
even before he got the meaning of the many tekelu farson, that's why his knees smote one against the other. He knew
He was in trouble.
he was in trouble. You don't act like that if you don't know something's really wrong.
Tamina?
She says also here, in the last night of mad folly Belshazzar and his lords had filled up the measure of their guilt and the guilt of the Chaldean kingdom. No longer could God's restraining hand ward off the impending evil. So in the night from midnight to midnight cry, I think the close of probation for them.
For the wicked and the righteous.
This is all night, but this is the height of the night.
Right, Sister White also points out that at the beginning of the feast there was a holy one walking among them investigating. So there was an investigation judgment that is happening beginning from 9/11.
But also we know also that your probation is open until you get to that midnight point in time for the righteous and the unrighteous, correct?
Your probation's open, but you have to settle into the character before that point.
Yeah, I get that.
Brittany?
I just have a question. I don't understand about the queen.
The queen.
Yeah. If our, if what some are suggesting our transition from midnight to midnight cry is marked maybe at verses 6 or 7, if that's a transition, I'm not understanding why the queen is coming in before.
I'm not hearing you, so probably the microphone isn't hearing you either.
What some are suggesting is the transition where we're starting to mark things at the midnight cry instead of midnight is around verses 6 or 7, is that correct?
Okay.
Okay, so why is the queen coming in before, like, the queen is mentioned way after, so why are we marking it before? I haven't been here. So.
Jeff had said, this is what Jack had asked as well, and Jeff's answer was that it could be a repeat and enlarge, but I don't think the transition is in 6 and 7. I think there's things there that show, like for instance, in verse 7 it says that Daniel, or that whoever makes it known, will be made third ruler. Daniel isn't made third ruler until much after the queen comes in. So I'm starting to think that maybe Tamina is right, and Tyler, in arguing that the writing on the wall comes in at midnight, and in that same hour, or sorry, he drinks it, in the same hour the writing on the wall happens, and just moments later the queen comes in. It's all happening in that midnight cry history, and then Daniel comes in at the midnight cry and is made third ruler. I don't think there has to be a repeat and enlarge. It seems like...
Yeah, I'm not arguing for a repeat and enlarge.
I just don't understand.
You don't understand what?
Why are we marking the queen at midnight? Like, why she's coming in at
Well, what Michael's saying is we're not marking her at midnight, we're marking her in this history.
Yeah. Just kind of
It's morning.
Okay, and we know this history from other lines has 3 steps. Right? So maybe she's in step number 2. Tanya?
The astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers coming first, and they're unable to solve the problem. We haven't marked where those come in first, and then the queen, and then come Daniel. So there's actually like 3 steps for resolving the mystery.
Bring in.
There are 3, right?
There's 3.
Yeah, you've got the wise men.
So if we're going to put the 3 in this history, then you could put them here. The astrologers, soothsayers, and Chaldeans. Because other threefold individuals get placed in there in other lines is the only reason I'm saying that. Sister Tamina, then Brother Michael.
2 things about the queen. Ellen White says, then the queen mother remembered Daniel. And we know that the cupbearer in Pharaoh's birthday remembers Daniel. And then another thing, who over half a century before had made known to King Nebuchadnezzar. Half a century isn't it 50 years? So we have a number 50 there when she remembers. I don't know what it means, but maybe it can help.
Both remember and 50 are Sunday law. 50 is Pentecost and Zechariah is Sunday law.
But on a fractal level, it's not.
Where did we mark where the cupbearer remembers Joseph in the dungeon?
back here.
Remember.
He remembers him at 9/11.
Yeah.
Oh, at the birthday.
It's like returning to the old path.
Zechariah.
Yeah, that's what she does, right? She's referring also to the.
She's old past, remembering the old past.
So why wouldn't she go back there then?
You want to put the queen all the way back here?
Isn't that also where
This queen's moving around, all right?
where Ahasuerus remembers Vashti? Didn't we mark that at 9/11? Brittany,
What? No, we marked that at the Sunday law.
Vashti being remembered at the Sunday law? Okay,
No, I thought we marked that at that one.
I thought somehow too.
So I see another hand.
I don't
Yeah, it was
remember.
fun.
Sorry.
Brittany's contention was verse 6 is that if there isn't a repeat and enlarge, then we have to square up the king's being troubled and his countenance changing with the fact that the queen comes later. So we've
And the loud cry.
and a loud cry. So it looks like verse 6 is talking about this midnight cry history because it says he was troubled, and right above we have Daniel. He's being troubled right then also. So that would kind of change that. His king's countenance changed at midnight area, time period, and his thoughts troubled him. So that
Countenance changed. What does it mean that his countenance changed?
he got scared.
Well, we
we
do
got-
the countenance change with the lamb like, and then turns to a.
It's like the heart change.
Sister, what?
Yeah, there's something about it that his visage changed in chapter 3.
form of his visage.
Okay,
changed.
so I'm thinking it's marking that their character is set,
Sister,
but maybe not.
Sister White points out that reason was brought back to him because he was under a control of wine. And when he had seen the hand over there, his reason was brought
Sobered up.
to, yeah, he sobered up basically, but he recognized what was happening.
But it was too late. Brittany.
Right.
The queen comes in after his countenance changes the second time. That's why I'm saying, why isn't she marked?
Where are the two? I don't. Where are the two countenances? I just see.
They're in
Verse 6 and 9, I think.
One
Nine.
is in verse 9, the first one was
6
in
and
verse
9.
5.
We in
6.
6.
his lords are astonished in verse 9, which puts it in the hour. And is in verse 6 through 9 there's two countenance changes, and there in verse 7 there's a loud cry. There's a doubling at the midnight cry. That's the logic of putting it at the midnight cry. Countenance is doubled. Loud cry, third ruler, midnight cry. But Michael's saying that this third ruler is a promise. He's going to be made third ruler further on, but there's a promise of being made the third ruler in this history, is what he's saying.
And that would go along because you can't have a third without a first and a second.
Yeah, that's the arrival of the third message.
Right.
So we're going to put the double countenance change in this history, and the queen comes in this history and makes this. You're saying it's a prediction. Is what Tom is saying correct? Is that a prediction?
About the queen.
That there is a man that can explain this?
I've understood it that way too. That she says that she absolutely this Daniel. I think she says Daniel will make known. She doesn't just say that there is a man. She says Daniel will tell you.
So what is the prediction? I mean, what is she predicting by saying that?
Oh yeah, that Daniel's going to give a message.
I think Daniel
It's a
is
prediction
doing-
of a prediction.
She's giving him a false hope.
Now you're looking at Belshazzar. I'm looking at the prediction. What does
it mean?
means? What does it mean that she's making a prediction about Daniel proclaiming the midnight cry? Is it just simply another reference to prediction?
Why would that be a prediction though? She already knows that he can do that.
She's telling the king,
She's predicting to the king.
there's a guy you're going to bring in here that's going to solve your problems.
But is that a prediction or a fact?
That's what I was asking,
it
and
sounds
they
like
all
it to
seem to
me.
think it is.
Sounds like a fact.
It sounds
Or is
like
it the
A fact? When we give the prediction, we will relate to it as a fact.
Yep.
If you don't have the faith to believe it's a fact, you won't speak. Right?
Right.
The angels.
Tamina?
In a spiritual sense, couldn't be the church telling the United States, look, the book of Daniel is going to tell you what's
The
going to happen.
church, who's the church?
church triumphant, maybe.
Maybe.
No, that's
One church, because a woman is a church, right? And a church is in front of the United States. Belteshazzar, I cannot pronounce his name.
Belteshazzar.
And she said she refers to Daniel, and we know that Daniel represents also the book of Daniel. And we came to know, to understand that the image of Daniel 2 is probably one of the messages we will give to the United States, that they will be overturned, right? And that's the message Daniel gives to Belteshazzar.
Belshazzar.
Belshazzar. I need to practice that one. That he's going to be overturned at the son-in-law.
Okay, how do you say Belshazzar in German?
Belshazzar.
Pretty much the same.
It is. Still have
So
a problem with
Is there any significance that Belshazzar stays face to face with Belteshazzar? They're pretty
Is
much
it the
almost
same?
identical.
It's
Look up
just,
to-
sometimes they use the same people and they spell it.
Okay, we're going to go back through the verses
Huh?
and keep going forward and try to straighten this out towards the end. Tyler and Brittany, and then we'll read some more.
Please make it
The only
no.
I see why we're putting everything where we're putting it right now. It makes sense. The only thing that I guess not worries me, but is that we're gonna put what we're doing is we're gonna put all the doublings and all of those things at midnight, which a little it sort of muddies the water with all the other passages we've ever looked at that a doubling places us at the midnight cry. I see why we're putting it at midnight. Everything seems to be really logical, but it seems to break down our logic of the difference between midnight and the midnight cry. And putting the church triumphant at midnight is like putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because they haven't even passed their test yet.
Okay, I have another argument to submit here after Brittany's.
I just find it peculiar that in verse 12, Belshazzar refers to Daniel by his Hebrew name and not his Babylonian name. So I don't know if it's like a name change.
Yeah, we got a name change there, marked, but
He's sealed.
what if verse 6 and verse 9 were midnight and the midnight cry? Because at those two waymarks, many times you have the same thing expressed. Countenance change, countenance change. Then would verse 6, 7, 8, and 9 fit in here? This would put the queen coming in right here.
So that's your period I'm pointing.
No, I'm not. I'm just.
Would you mind repeating that?
In verse 6, it says, "Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him." And then in verse 9, it says, "Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him." The point being is that this waymark and this waymark often are the same thing. So you got the king's countenance changed and he's troubled at both of these. If you were going to say that this is midnight in verse 6 and midnight cry in verse 9, what's that do if you relate to it that way?
Would it still work to do a repeat and large then if the queen comes in?
Then the queen comes in here to the banquet hall. And what does that mean for you in terms of Esther?
She comes in.
Yeah, she comes in there, and that's when the second
This is where Esther does her double feast, is what you're saying?
That's
In the banquet hall? Are everyone following that?
It's the first day of the feast, yeah. Or the first feast that she has.
Could it be that it's a doubling when the queen comes in and then Daniel comes in? That we both can mark them at the midnight cry as a doubling, two people coming in front of the king?
No. I don't know. We're going to read. Make your point quick.
Never mind.
Now, whose turn to read? Your turn to read? Next 5 verses.
There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy God. And in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the God was found in him. Whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father the king, I say, thy father made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge, an understanding, interpreting of dreams, and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Then was Daniel brought in before the king. And the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing, and make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But they could not show the interpretation of the thing.
You have an inquiry and a name change
Where?
at the Midnight Cry.
You're putting that at the Midnight Cry. An
If
inquiry?
If we're going with the logic that you were saying that.
No, don't go with my logic.
No, but it's there anyway, is what I'm saying. You have an
Alright.
inquiry there. But I'm saying it makes
Where,
sense.
where's the inquiry?
At
What
the Midnight
verse?
Cry. Oh, verse 13.
13.
So the queen comes in and says, Daniel can make you understand, and Daniel comes in and that all happens.
Okay, so
The queen.
Tamina's arguing, could that be a doubling, that both the queen and Daniel come in? Is there any second witness for something like that?
We've never done it that way before.
Is there a second witness for that? We've never done it that way
Well,
before.
not
It
that I
puts
know
that
of.
thought in people's mind, and that ain't the right thought to put in their mind.
You get the number 2, you got the 2 enemies, but not.
Okay, Midnight Cry. Do we see in the Midnight Cry 2 different people representing the doubling anywhere else?
Yes.
Yes. Where?
Elizabeth
And Elizabeth and Mary both come in and prophesy at the Midnight Cry. So the Queen and Daniel
But
might
they're
be
together.
Elizabeth and Mary.
But they're
Isn't that where the
together.
doubling originates?
Do we have any evidence that when Daniel comes in, the Queen leaves before he gets there?
No.
She can be standing right there. She's just given Belshazzar a message. Now Daniel's going to give him a message, just like Mary and
You
Elizabeth.
kind of have a double prophecy almost there. She tells him, one thing, and Daniel tells him another thing, but they're both prophetic messages in a sense.
Double message.
Moses and Aaron go in front of the Pharaoh and tell him about the plagues. Isn't that also at the Midnight
Tell him
Cry?
about what?
The
The
plagues.
plagues.
Isn't that also at the Midnight Cry?
Yeah.
So we have also 2 people in front of the king.
Okay, so is everyone following that logic?
You also have Joshua and Eliezer are raised up.
Joshua and Eliezer are raised up there, so we got double people.
Yeah. Move
At
the
the-
queen on the board. Yeah.
I'm going to put the Queen plus Daniel. A doubling right there. Now what's that do to all this?
Yeah.
But what's good about this is there's with the Queen there's a remembering.
And a 50. And the old path.
And 50.
What's the 50?
What's the 50?
Half a century.
Pentecost.
A statement that says a half century before.
Yeah, she remembered. She remembered what happened half a century before.
So what is
She
that?
says 50.
That's Sunday law.
No,
Half a
but a half a
century.
century is 50.
No, I know.
She says half a century.
That's
She
good for a
says-
different reason.
Yeah, she
It is.
says nearly.
Why is it good for a different reason?
Chronologically, we were struggling with the time frame. If she says a half a century, Nebuchadnezzar has his judgment, or whatever.
look it
It
up.
helps us place the distance between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, which we, anyways, it's cool.
Which we what?
Which we didn't know, or at least
Well-
we speculated from secular history, like, oh, there's 70 something years
over half.
between the beginning of his reign and
It's over.
Daniel
half.
ruled over half a century before had made no
Over
to
half
the
a
king.
Over.
Okay, over
It's
half
hard
a
to
century.
follow it.
Oh,
so it's
over
still
half,
it's
okay.
so
Same
still
time.
she's given the approximation closer to a
So,
half a century.
Is it
than a
okay to
century.
keep that 50 over
No,
50?
actually,
No.
you can't.
It's not 50.
But it is okay to say that it's referencing near 50.
Yeah, it could be
But
50 years and
52.
2 weeks, and it's still 50 years.
Yeah, I'm not saying for her argument. I'm saying for the chronological argument. It's
Okay, so let's go back through these verses now and try to put this history in place. Who wants to take a shot at it?
Can I add some information before we go there? I just looked up the three names of Nabonidus, which was the father of Belshazzar and Daniel. And it's very interesting. Nabonidus is Nebo is exalted, a Babylonian god is exalted. Belshazzar means Bel protects the king, and then Daniel's God is my judge. In the light of the three angels' message, you see an exaltation, a false exaltation. Nebo is exalted. Then Bel protected the king as we like Babylon has fallen. And then God is my judge, you see the judgment.
Okay. So we need to deal with the troubling.
Um,
Go ahead.
Jordan would like to add something, so he asked me to say. In Portuguese it's easier to see, but you can see in English also that the trouble.
In what verse?
In verse 6.
Verse 6.
It's the same. His loins were loosed. Is the same or the same word. In Portuguese it's exactly one. In English is close to it. That Jesus felt after they give them vinegar to drink. Yeah,
Vinegar.
which is in Psalm 69:21-23. Their loins continually to shake, and that's happened between the 6 hours, the sixth hour and the 9th hour, which is between midnight and midnight.
So
the writing must happen at midnight, and the trouble between in the between.
The loins being loose, the joints of his loins loosed.
Yeah, you see that in Psalm 69:23.
Psalm 69:23. Let's read it.
And if you start reading from 21 to 23.
They gave me also gall for my meat, and in my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. Let their table become a snare before them, and that which should have been for their welfare, let it become a trap. And that's what the two tables do. Let their eyes be darkened, that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake.
Where is it in Matthews?
Pour out thine indignation upon them, and let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. Let their habitation be desolate, Babylon being desolated that very night. Okay, so what you're saying is that between the 6th hour and the 9th hour is where
the trouble happens.
The trouble, 6th and 9th hour on the cross, the loins loose.
And we just said the 6th and the 9th verses of the two countenance changes. Right?
Yeah.
So that the 6th verse is the first, and that's the 6th hour, and the 9th verse is the second countenance change, and that's the 9th hour.
Yeah.
That's what he just said 2 minutes
Yeah.
ago.
And then we have
So-
Daniel 6 and 9.
That's interesting.
That night
That's
after
Daniel
the
16.
First countenance
Not by accident.
change. Countenance change. All right. In the same hour. So this is the hour. The handwriting comes on the wall. Where's the candlestick?
Can we be in the same place?
Be in the same place. Would it be? Okay, so are we going to say there's a wall here?
Yeah.
When we say there's a wall here, what does that mean?
There's a decree.
There's a decree here.
The king speaks.
The king speaks there?
In verse 7.
In verse 7? Okay, so a speaking and a wall equals a decree. What are we missing now? Verse King's countenance changed, thoughts troubled him. Verse 7, he cries aloud. Are we putting he's crying aloud in this history?
I don't think so.
See, if we're going to mark the 6th, the countenance changes in the 6th and 9th verses, then you would have to put a loud cry in here, right?
It's the midnight cry, technically.
It's the midnight cry technically, so it's okay to put a loud cry in here?
I guess. It's the same message.
If that message
It swells to a loud cry.
that swells.
Samuel Snow gives the midnight cry message here and he gives it here.
Yep. He cries aloud, and then it gets loud.
It gets louder.
It's a swelling, so we will put a loud cry in here.
It's 1840 where the angel of Revelation 10 comes down and he cries with a loud voice.
Cries with a loud voice, that's 1840 over here.
Again, we've understood that the midnight cry is the loud cry. It's just, it
Yeah.
grows into that.
It's escalating. And you got reference in here that he will be made third ruler, and you got 3 contrasting astrologers, soothsayers, and Chaldeans possibly marking out the 3 steps of this history, because we do it with people sometimes. Then came in all the king's wise men. They couldn't read it. So now the queen comes in. We're saying the queen comes in here. And she's going to point to Daniel. And she's referencing the old paths. But the old paths are over here.
It is the first step for that group of people right there.
First step is old paths.
I believe it.
Is then here, is there old paths over here?
Yep.
What are the old paths over here?
Sabbath.
Sabbath for the 11th hour workers. Old paths for us as priests, foundational truths. What would be the old paths here for the Levites?
9/11.
9/11 would be the old paths
For the
for
priests.
the Levites.
For the priests.
No, 9/11 is the old paths for the priests.
Right.
Oh,
We're marking an old paths here, which is we know is the time of the Levites. What is the message of the old paths for the Levites?
Sabbath.
The chart.
Oh.
Sabbath is the old
No,
paths for
no.
the 11th hour workers.
Right.
You mean the right history?
Something to do with the marriage.
It's Millerite history.
Yeah.
Why did you say that?
Because it is.
Because it is. You've learned it rote, but you can't defend it under scrutiny. All right.
Yeah, it's not exactly to this, but on 5:8 it says that they could not read the writing. Yes, and I just looked at the word read. It could also be translated as to proclaim or to read aloud, call. So they were not able to proclaim what was.
They're not able to participate in the midnight cry.
Yeah, they can't proclaim the message. That's what I'm saying.
So Sister White points out that it was a secret. He says, but here was a secret he could not fathom, a power he could not neither understand nor gainsay. In despair he turned to the wise men of his realm for help. His wild cry rang out in the assembly, calling upon the astrologer, the Chaldean, and the soothsayer to read the writing. And of course they can do it, and that's when he's astonished.
Okay, I have to go back to that. Why is the old past of the Levites Millerite history, and for the priests it's 9/11? Shouldn't it be rather the opposite?
No, but did everyone understand your question? Okay, why are the old paths? What are the old paths? What's the old past test for the priests at 9/11?
The charts?
Yeah, foundational truths, both charts, foundation pillars. These are the old, return to these old paths, yes? That's for the
Millerite
priests.
history.
No, that isn't Millerite history. That's these truths.
Is it?
Oh.
It includes Millerite history. But why is it that our Dutch friend is saying that it is Millerite history that is the old paths for the Levites?
Yeah, history repeats.
Because Millerite history repeats. What is it that the Levites have to see?
Oh, the first midnight cry prefigures the second.
Maybe. What's happening at the midnight cry?
How the confirmation of the method.
The Living
Okay.
Testament.
Who do we sometimes say the queen is?
Church triumphant.
Church triumphant. What are the Levites? What do the Levites have to see?
The Living Testimony.
They have to recognize the church triumphant. Why?
That's their visual.
Yeah, that's their visual. Why do they have to recognize and understand what it means?
I thought it was a living testimony.
That
It
is.
is, it's a visual to see a living testimony.
The church triumphant
see
is the
how
living
people are
testimony.
living.
But why? What is it that the Levites have to understand about the church triumphant?
That it's God's church.
That it's God's church. And what do they got to do?
Join it.
Join it.
They got to join it. What's their point of reference for understanding that they need to leave the fallen churches and stand with the Millerites?
Second angel's message.
That's Millerite history. Millerite history is showing a transition from one covenant people to another covenant people. They're going to have to see that Millerite history is being repeated right here, and that there is a covenant people that the Lord enters into covenant with right here, and they have to stand with them. That's why the Old Pass is Millerite history a little bit different than these. Each one of these waymarks has an Old Pass, but that's not what we're dealing with. The queen comes in here, double persons given a message. There's an inquiry. Whose turn to read? We need to get through this. Even if we come back to it tomorrow, the reading will be done. And we're not going to get done with it today, obviously.
Verse 16.
Brother Gabriel, I guess, right? Tanya?
No, go ahead.
Tanya, go for it.
Your turn, Tanya.
And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretation and resolve doubts. If thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father kingdom, and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. All the way to where?
That's a Sunday
good.
law right
Okay.
there.
And
That's
where
a
was
Sunday
his heart lifted up? Right
Right
here. And his kingdom's taken from him. So this judgment's got to parallel Belshazzar's judgment, which is here. Pardon me?
No, I'm sorry, continue.
In an external sense.
Sister Brittany?
Can you put the gifts up there?
The gifts.
That was her point from earlier, is that the gifts in verse 17, Daniel refers to the chain, the scarlet, and the ring, I think, as gifts. And we understand that gifts is placed at the midnight cry.
Gifts.
Well, the thing is that Belshazzar offers them there, but I don't know if as we progress in this chapter, Daniel later receives it at a different waymark, but the time when he offers it is different than the time Daniel receives it.
And he mentions that he will give those gifts to someone.
Right.
Now he's saying, if you can do it, I'll give it to you.
Right.
I think
And he's going to say, give them to someone else.
Right, but Daniel does get them
He
at
does
the
get
end
them.
of the chapter.
Verse 29.
Yeah.
But where does he get him is what you're saying. Does he
Yeah,
get him
where-
here or here?
Right.
Okay, so next 5 verses, Brother Gabriel. 21 through 25.
Yeah. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast. And his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled the kingdom of man, and that he appointed over it whomsoever he will. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, thy concubines, have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and of stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and his writing was written. And this is the writing that was written, Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom, and finished it.
Keep reading. You started the
Tekel.
second 5, so read it all the way to the end.
Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances, and art found wanting. Paris, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians.
Keep reading.
Keep reading.
To the end of the chapter.
Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And that night Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
He's slain here, right?
Yeah.
So it gives the Daniel's. You two, I have to break you up in the back. You're going to have your own conversations going on. Right here, he's given the interpretation, right? So this is where he's made the third ruler. Comes in, right? He comes in, he gives interpretation and gives it to him. And that night he's slain. Tanya?
I want to point out that when the writing was written, it was called Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin, which is you have 4 steps in there. But when Daniel gives the interpretation, he only uses 3. Mene Tekel Perez. And actually Perez is the identical usage of Upharsin. It's just there's 4 and there's a 3. There's a significance there.
I wanted to address the same thing as Tanya does. Could that be the binding off between Midnight Cry and the Sunday Law, because we have the 4 there and the 3, so we have 3, 4. And could the Mene Tekel Paris be the 3 steps from the midnight to the from Midnight Cry to the Sunday Law?
Many, Tekel, and Ferris.
Paris.
We're saying those are the. You're saying those are the 3 steps.
Yes, but as she says before, it was mentioned Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin, so that would be 4, and we might mark always in the binding of the 3 and the 4.
Yeah, but where does this appear?
The Mene at Midnight Cry.
It appears at the.
Doubling. It's the doubling. Mene Mene.
He's explaining it there at least.
He's explaining it there, but we're arguing it's back here at midnight.
That's what I was reading.
But Midnight Cry pretty much are.
Pretty much.
I mean,
It's the binding off, so you see it at midnight to Midnight Cry and Midnight Cry to the Sun. Maybe.
It was written back there. It was explained.
It was written on the wall here. Okay, this is where his probation closes. Any other thoughts? So we got 5 minutes to bind this subject off before tomorrow when we go back through it one more time.
Okay, to add to that, sorry. When you want to say, okay, it was written at midnight, you have there the number 4 in that binding off. And the Daniel gives the interpretation at the Midnight Cry, so we are in the next binding off, and we have the number 3 there, which are the 3 steps, because Mene first, he's numbered, and then Tekel would be maybe the visual second step, because he's weighed in a balance, and you see a balance how it is, right? It's visual. And then in the third step, the kingdom is divided and taken from him, which is the Sunday Law.
you have to break in pieces to separate, to split up.
Okay. So, what haven't we resolved? I won't ask. It's too early in the morning. What is our problem here between this history and here that we haven't resolved? Or do we have one? Could you teach it just like that?
Would take a while.
Yeah, and what we're going to do here is we're going to erase these, right? I'm going to do it now and just bring them down, right? Where these two chapters go together. But we have some squishy stuff in here, right? So maybe a third line will help clarify it. I don't think this is this difficult. It comes at midnight. This is one of the places where we're stumbling, right? Is the many tekel upharsin here at midnight, or is it the midnight cry? It's on the wall here. His probation closes here.
I believe it's at midnight because, like the chapter 4, we have a dream, and Daniel came to explain it. In the chapter 5, you have the many tekel upharsin, and after Daniel came and explained it. So I believe it's the same thing.
In chapter 4, Daniel doesn't come to explain it here.
Yeah, but first came the dream, I believe.
In chapter 4,
Yeah.
the dream's back here, right?
Okay.
And then Daniel comes and explains it here. Yes? I'm.
Right, for 1 hour, he waits for 1 hour.
He's astonished for 1 hour.
Oh, yeah. And then he explains it.
So he explains it here too.
Yeah.
Okay, so this 1 hour when he's astonished is this 1 hour when he gets brought in to explain it. Astonished 1 hour, astonished 1 hour. Trouble. And we argued in this history that the trouble, the reason it's got the blue line is not necessarily Islam. What was it in Daniel 4? Remember that discussion?
Yeah, Daniel was, his thoughts troubled
He was troubled.
because he understood what was about to happen.
The revelation, what had been revealed to him caused him anxiety. So this trouble here, is this Islam when Belshazzar's loins are loosed? Brittany's saying yes.
It's whatever troubles the king,
Yeah.
which is Islam, at least at one level it is.
And then what's going to trouble our kings is the economic.
So, wait,
Crisis
before
that it's gonna
you
put
jump
us
on that, are you going to say that Islam is going to strike and be restrained here, and strike and be restrained here?
We've proven that he is going to strike at
What?
midnight.
Really?
Cry.
Well,
Midnight
I
cry.
thought from previous classes we had determined
I
that.
thought it was midnight cry. And then there's a hold at the midnight cry. In previous-
We place a hold in 1989,
And 9/11.
9/11,
Midnight cry. And Sunday law.
and Sunday law,
Yeah.
and then released here.
Right.
We haven't put a hold here.
We have put a loose at that point because of the second woe. But we haven't said that there's a striking at that point. It's that he's able to, and he doesn't strike until
At the second woe, we put a hold and a release.
Yeah.
Because in 1840 it's held, and in 1453 it's released.
But just from, as we've looked at the line of 1449 to 1453.
Oh, that's 1449.
1449 we've put at midnight, and 1453 at the midnight cry. So as I've understood
So
it,
they're released in
it-
1449.
yeah, there's something going on, but they haven't done any damage until the midnight cry. That's when they really strike.
That's when the
Or
double.
at least that's because that's when the walls of Constantinople come.
But then when you take the beginning of that, or the end of that prophecy,
And
and
put it
you
over
plug
the opposite.
1840 in here, they're restrained.
Yeah. I'm not sure we ever fully.
And then in 1844, they're restrained again.
Yeah.
Okay, so the trouble may be Islam, but there's evidently a doubling here at midnight. If we're going to put the handwriting on the wall there, because you got many, many.
In the line of Nebuchadnezzar, we put the reason returned to him at Sunday law. But Sister Weiss points out that the reason was returned to Belshazzar when fear struck him. Do we put that, have we put that anywhere, if the reason returned to Belshazzar too?
Reason returns, well, we can put it in here. We'll have to explain. He sobers up.
Okay.
Yeah, but she says that reason returns, I mean, I'll find it for you, but.
No, you're not find it for me. He sobers up. I'm just saying it's his,
Starts realizing what's happening.
I don't know. Okay, we'll try, I thought we'd be through chapter 6 by now.
Father in heaven, we thank you for your word. Lord, please guide us into all truth. Help us to understand these things that you are now unsealing. And Lord, help us individually to apply our minds, Lord, to the personal study of these things, to make them our own. And we pray that as we do so, Lord, we may flash light into our minds, light that may be a blessing to us and can be brought before others. Father, we ask for your blessing throughout the rest of this day. Guide us in the work of our hands. Lord, help us to be a blessing to each other. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.